Hey, this is the Remote Podcast, and I am your host, Victor Kung. You're listening to episode 2. Hello, and welcome to the Remote Podcast. This podcast is all about location independence, digital nomadism, and living life on your own terms. Each week, we interview a new guest on the show, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Zoë Björnson, a product marketing manager at About.me and a participant on Remote Year, a digital nomad community that travels to 12 countries in 12 months. In this week's episode, we talk about remote work and travel. We discuss how Zoë got involved in remote work, what life is like as a remote worker, and what qualities companies look for when hiring remote workers. We also talk about how travel fits into the remote lifestyle and discuss Zoë's experiences in Remote Year. You won't want to miss this. This is insider scoop on the popular Remote Year program. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 2 of the Remote Podcast. For the show notes and interview transcription, visit www.theremotelifestyle.com/2. Hey Zoë, so nice to have you join the podcast.
Thanks, Victor. I'm excited to be here.
I know we talked about this like a few months ago, and so it's really cool to finally have you on board.
Definitely.
So you are on month 7 of Remote Year, is that right?
I am. I'm in Belgrade, Serbia. I just came from Prague in the Czech Republic. So yeah, just hit the halfway point this week, and it's pretty surreal.
So you like it? You like it in Belgrade so far?
It's been a really, really nice surprise. Belgrade was not a country I'd ever been to. Actually, out of our 4 European cities, we were in London, Prague, we're in Belgrade now, and then we're going to be in Split, Croatia. Belgrade was the only European city I hadn't been to. So I had no context for what Belgrade was going to be like. Didn't really do any research beforehand. I heard sort of inklings about it was a really cool place, really cheap, kind of a party city, if you will. But the last 4 or 5 days have been really awesome. And it's definitely surprised me with like quirky cafes, great food, super, super affordable. And it's just a beautiful city overall, a little bit more gritty than Prague. Prague is like super fairy tale like. And you can tell that Serbia has this kind of darker tone to it. But I really love it so far.
Well, awesome. So for the people who don't know, can you talk a bit about what Remote Year is?
Totally. So Remote Year is a program that lets you travel and work remotely with around 75 other people. You have to have your own job prior to the program starting or kind of be able to, fit the bill, the $2,000 bill each month. But we travel in a group. We go to a different city every month. My program started in South America. Did 4 months in South America. We're doing 4 months in Europe right now. And then we go to Asia for 4 months. So it kind of takes it's almost like a traveling co-working space. It's tons of like community vibes. We have a co-working space every place we go. Remote Year organizes our accommodations and all of our travel in between. So it takes the headache out of being a digital nomad. So for people who don't really want to deal with that spontaneous aspect, but still want to travel the world and work remotely, it's a really great fit.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. It sounds like the dream life. Okay, so that's where you are right now, but let's take a step back to the very beginning, moving into how you got involved in remote work and then how you eventually became a digital nomad. So I'd love to hear your story on that.
My story of digital nomadism. I had always kind of had travel in my life. I was super, super fortunate growing up that was something my parents put first, instead of having a huge house and, the fanciest cars. Like they really loved going on vacation, and we would kind of do the slower travel thing and swap houses with families we knew in different cities. So when I was growing up, we were going to France for like a month, swapping houses with a family we knew. So I'd spend a month in France as a kid. Yeah, it was a really incredible experience, and I'm grateful to kind of have that as a base. And it was just, I always loved kind of living in that place. And granted, we would go back to the same house and city every year, but it, as someone who is learning French and kind of growing up and seeing this totally different culture, it was just a really, really unique experience. And then from there, it trickled into me studying abroad in Copenhagen my junior year of college. After I graduated from college, I spent about 2 months traveling around Europe. I made a point to go to college outside of my state. I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, and I grew up in California. So I was just like, I want to get out. I want to see something different. I've sort of always been attracted to seeing different cities and experiencing new things in different places. So I definitely had the travel bug. My mom had it too. She traveled a ton when she was pregnant with me. So I think it kind of just infused into me when I was, in the belly. But I think that's what kickstarted it all. And when I was in college, I actually did a lot of, I didn't know it at the time, but it was remote work. I would do sort of digital internships. I was a writer for a couple of online publications that were super college focused. I kind of started working on a media company with some internet friends. I was just online all the time. I was working from my bed, and little did I know that was the kind of the start of my digital nomadism, or at least remote work.
Okay. So that you got the travel bug very young, when you're not even born yet.
Yeah, exactly.
But you also mentioned how in college you did a lot of work that now you know to be remote work. So can you talk a bit about how you got involved in that? Did it just, were you just an avid writer and you reached out to these publications on your own, or did it happen unexpectedly?
It was super unexpected for me. I think the first company I started working kind of remotely for, with this online publication, I came from a photography angle. I'd always loved photography growing up. I took some classes. I was taking a film photography course in college. And so I just thought it was a good opportunity and a good place for exposure to get my work out there. So I would go to events, take pictures, put them online. And that moved to me reaching out to other publications. And that's how I started writing. I've never considered myself a writer, yet I am writing every single day for my job today. I've kind of built my career, I guess you could say, out of social media and this kind of very writing focused skill. So I didn't study English. I studied communication, but I never thought this was going to be kind of my thing. But I just started reaching out to more and more publications and kind of finding my way and seeing what I liked and seeing what I didn't like, and just trying to do more of what I did like. And I kind of found this little passion for writing, even though I don't, I get a lot of kind of that imposter syndrome. I don't know what AP style is.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is right. Is the grammar even right? I don't know. So I always kind of have that inkling in me, but I do have a passion for it. And that's kind of how it trickled into reaching out to more different companies, and then also just meeting people who are working for these publications and, starting something new out of that. So I had friends kind of all over the country that I'd never met, but I was communicating weekly with to get a blog post out, or to work with a brand on, reviewing their products and showing them on the site, to kind of doing that native advertising thing. So it was just very natural, and it just was a lot of me going after what I liked doing and seeing what happened.
Wow,
next.
that's really, really cool. For the people out there who want to perhaps pursue freelance writing, if you were to break this down into steps, how would you describe the process you went through?
For me, it started out by identifying something that I really liked to do, and that was photography. Maybe it's, for some people, it's reviewing products, or it's writing listicles, or it's kind of one specific thing that you could point out. You say, I like doing this, I want to do more of it. And then step 2 would kind of be building that portfolio. For me, it was going out and taking photos and going to events and using my camera and just taking pictures, getting that experience no matter where they were going to go. For a writer, it could be start writing on Medium, start your own kind of publication. You don't need to be hired to have a portfolio. I think that's a lot of things that kind of younger freelancers, maybe college students, get wrong. They're like, oh, so no one's going to hire me, so I don't have any work to show for it. That's total BS. You can make something out of nothing. You just have to go out and do it. And there's so many tools now that you can create a fake Twitter account or a fake Instagram account. Just something to show your stuff, and then you can give it to publications. You can send it to brands. just have a starting point, have something to point to that shows your skill set. So step 1 would be identify what you're good at and what you like to do. Step 2 is build that portfolio, go out and do it. And step 3 would just be kind of get it out there. Send it to the publication, send it to the brands, and then go back and iterate on it. What do they have feedback? Are you doing anything better? Like, do you like something in particular about writing? Do you like writing thought pieces? Do you like interviewing people? Do you like podcasting? Like, it's all this kind of circle of iteration, as I like. It's like you identify what you like, you do it, and then from there you identify from what you just did, what you don't like and what you do like, and hone in on that and just kind of go through that process until you figure out, what you like and what you're doing right.
No, I really like the way you word it, because you make it sound like such an organic, such a natural process of just doing something you like, sharing it with the world, and then just continuing that cycle.
Totally.
So that's how you got started. So after you graduated, how did you get involved with About.me, and what's your current role with them?
Totally. So as I was working for all these online publications in college, I met a friend of mine, Paris Rosati, who had moved out to San Francisco maybe like kind of around the time that I graduated. I had just gotten back from Europe on my 2-month kind of post-grad Euro trip, the typical thing. And I really wanted to travel. The travel bug bit me even harder. I was like, I want to work internationally. Like, how do I figure this out? And I was looking for jobs, kind of just making money on the side. Paris reached out to me saying that About.me could use me in some way, shape, or form. There wasn't really a traditional job description or anything I responded to, but I said, okay, why not? So I had a call with Tony Conrad, our CEO and founder, one of our co-founders, and my friend Paris, and we kind of talked about my strengths and what I'd done in the past and how I could help them. And the next day I went to the office. I had a meeting with Tony. I had a Skype meeting with my boss when I joined the company, Antonio Neves, and it just worked out. And that evening I had an offer letter, and I started as the editorial and social. Actually, no, my first title was a college outreach coordinator for About.me. So I was helping Antonio, who was our director of higher education. I was helping him and my other coworker, John. We were the college team, and we were going after college students, trying to get them on About.me, seeing how we could make that product market fit specifically for college students. So I was working on partnerships. I was writing blog posts. I was interviewing students, doing social media. I mean, everything under the sun. But that was my first role at About.me, and I don't think I even knew it when I went in for my quote unquote interview, but it was a remote job, and my boss Antonio was living in Los Angeles, and I was living in my mom's house in Palo Alto, California. So we were, an hour flight away. At the time, I was thinking about moving to Austin. So Paris and, was like, if you join the company, like, you can move to Austin and work remotely. Like, there were all these what ifs, and I had just graduated from college, so it was just kind of this crazy whirlwind of a week. And I took the job, and that's kind of how it started for me. There's so many spin-off stories that go from there, but I'm currently a product marketing manager for About.me. So I'm on the product team. I've kind of moved. I went from the college team to the marketing team to the product team. I've had 3 roles now at About.me. And I work on kind of developing our product and acquiring new users and seeing how we can make the product better for our current users. It's really, really exciting and a totally different role than I entered this company with, but I love how innovative it can be and how different it is every day, and how I can create, something from nothing based on what we are finding that our users need and or want. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm in Belgrade, so I can't really complain about anything.
Yeah, that's so crazy. So how long have you been with About.me?
It will be 2 years in October.
So within 2 years, you've had 3 different roles in the team, and you've been to, at the very least, 7 countries already.
Yeah, let's make it 8. I went to Aruba last fall. So
it's a whirlwind of 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, it's been great. Actually, I think more than that, because I went to France, and I've been a crazy person this past couple months. But yeah, I mean, during my time at About.me, I've lived in Palo Alto with my mom. I lived in Los Angeles with my dad. I lived in New York for 4 months last summer. I crashed on a friend's couch in Denver. I went to Aruba for a week. Like, I've just been bouncing around. And yeah, I've had 3 jobs, 3 different managers.
Well, that sounds amazing. For those people who don't know, what exactly does About.me do?
Totally. About.me creates a very simple, beautiful one-page website that kind of helps you kickstart your personal brand. So it's super simple, takes 3 minutes to set up, and it'll have your name, your photo, your bio, your social links, and then we have this thing called a spotlight, which is a primary call to action. So for you, it could be listen to my spotlight. For me, maybe it's view my photos or read my blog. For someone who's looking for a new job, it's hire me. So it's a really, really simple website that just is to the point and kind of helps you achieve those, main goals that you want people to point to. We call it a page with a purpose. Instead of just a crazy website that some people don't need, that takes time to, set up and design and develop, and who knows if it even works or is responsive or looks good. Like, there's all these extra variables. But with an About.me page, like, super simple. You can set it up in minutes. It's responsive. Right. It's kind of obvious. About.me/Zoë Björnson. You know what you're getting if you see that in an email, if you see that on my resume. If you have some crazy website that's like XYZ and, PDQ and ZoeSocialMedia.com, it's just a little overwhelming. But even with our most basic free plan, About.me/insert your name here, people are going to know what they're getting. So it's super simple. We kind of call it a digital business card. Just a great way to introduce yourself online.
No, I'm seeing some synergies between you and the brand, because earlier we were talking about how you were building your personal brand, doing what you love, which was photography and a little bit of writing as well. So how did About.me find you in the first place? And what do you think were the qualities that they were looking for in, a successful remote worker?
That's a good question. First of all, it was my friend Paris who kind of brought me in. So she had worked with me before, but again, we'd never met in person. So she sort of knew that I had worked remotely before. Not that by any means was part of the job description, because there was none. But she knew that I was kind of a hard worker, a self-starter. I think at our company, we have a lot of people who work remotely. We have a lot of people who go into the San Francisco office maybe once a week. So we don't have the typical kind of company culture with ping pong tables and, happy hours on Fridays, which would be awesome. But at the same time, you got to kind of swap certain things for other things. But I think they were looking for people, and specifically me, the self-starters, the go-getters, the people that can do things and make things happen without having someone say, hey, go make this happen. And that's the kind of person that I am. I don't always need direction to get something done. I think another quality of myself that was probably attractive is that I ask a lot of why questions, and I'm kind of not that quick to say yes. Or I'm a devil's advocate, in other words, which can sometimes, get me in trouble. And sometimes I need to be more of a yes woman. But I think it really helps, especially now, this role that I'm in now in the product team. It's like, well, why are we going to build that? Why do we need to change that? How are we going to test that? You can't say yes to everything. So I think that's one of the qualities that has made me successful in my current role. I also think that I have a pretty broad range of experience, from social media to writing to kind of branding, and have a little bit of a design mind. I'm not a designer by any means, but I kind of can articulate what I want to see or whatnot. So Paris had seen that in me, and I think that's really important when you're hiring younger people. They need to be able to do a lot of things and to be thrown into the mix and just kind of go ahead and do it, or at least try.
I think it's really cool how you phrased it. How they're looking for people who are self-starters, people who are independent, people who ask the question why. Have you had any work experiences in the past when you have worked at a non-remote company? And I'm curious to hear, do you notice significant differences between these two types of work environments? And do you notice very common traits among all your remote colleagues?
Mm-hmm. I think one of them is kind of the self-starters. Like you rely on yourself to get things done and you have to be your own point of contact. I think another one, it was really interesting for me this past summer. I had my first intern. I'd never managed an intern before. Like I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'd have been an intern, of course, but I'd never had my own. And he was, of course, a remote intern. He was back in San Francisco while I was in Cusco, Peru. I was in London. I was in Prague. I was in France. So he was in one city and I was in four. It was pretty crazy. But in my experience as an intern, I'd done some smaller project assistant kind of internships in college, but my main one was when I was living in New York the summer after my junior year of college, before my senior year. I worked for a digital agency that worked with some top brands in the States, Nine West, Seven for All Mankind, Claire's, Victoria's Secret, Brian Atwood, a ton of really big fashion lifestyle brands. And they created social content and worked on campaigns. And they also managed a lot of fashion bloggers. So they sort of paired, it was really the heat of this influencer marketing phase. So it was bloggers and fashion brands and fashion and lifestyle brands. And they kind of married the two of them and created these partnerships. And I worked on both teams and created content for all these brands and also worked on managing these bloggers. And that internship was amazing, and it taught me so much in terms of the social media realm and influencer marketing. But what I found is that a lot of the stuff that I did when I was in that New York City office in Chelsea, I was doing a lot of task-based things. It would be kind of get these reports and put it in a document, or organize this deck, or call people about this event. It was just like a really long to-do list all summer. And I learned a ton, and I have a lot kind of to show from it in terms of my portfolio. So writing samples for social media and kind of, I worked on this campaign that got 1 million impressions. I have those kind of numbers and stuff, but I don't have a big project like, I did this whole data analysis, or I did anything like that. So I took that experience and I sort of applied my learnings to my intern and hit what his summer was going to be like. And he came out of it with like a data analysis presentation, all these sort of like resume bullets that you would be proud to put on your resume. And that was part me managing him. It was also the other team members who helped manage him. But it was also because, he was a self-starter and I wasn't sitting at the desk next to him holding his hand, and he couldn't just tap me and say, hey, Zoe, like, how do you want this spreadsheet to look? Or, hey, Zoe, like, how should I reach out to these students that, we want to get on About.me? He just had to figure it out. And it didn't really help him that I was sometimes 9 hours ahead, of a time zone. I recently wrote, kind of a blog post just organizing all these thoughts. And it really made me realize that remote workers, like, you physically can't hold their hand. And you also don't want a remote worker who you have to handhold, because that's just not going to be a successful relationship or help the company be successful, I don't think. That's a long answer.
For that story.
That's a long answer, but I think it helps.
Yeah, I think that was a great story, and I think you're totally right. I always feel like when you give people more responsibility and when they're not able to be handheld, I think a lot of times you'll be surprised by what people are capable of doing.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And I don't know why, but based on your experiences, it seems like in an office environment, perhaps people are more reluctant to give opportunities to maybe younger individuals. Yep. And perhaps there's more supervision. I always felt that whenever I was working in an office, I have a consulting background at Accenture. Whenever I was in the office, I felt like I was being supervised. Like I had to do
totally
this. I had to work a certain way, even if it wasn't necessarily the way I would do things. And I had a few opportunities to work remotely from home, and I found that to work a lot better for me. I was able to be a lot more productive.
Yep.
Curate that kind of environment that works well for me. So I totally relate in that sense.
I think what you mentioned about being supervised is super applicable. And I think personally, if I know I'm being watched and like, I'm sitting next to my boss or something, I would feel like I perform the task even worse, or I do it too fast and, I kind of get messed up. I can't do it at my own pace because, I think someone's watching me. And I think for younger people in the workforce, it can be super helpful for them to have that remote experience because they have to be self-starters, but they can do it at their own pace and they can, figure, excuse my French, but figure their shit out on their own time. Like I wasn't sitting next to my intern, Quentin, being like, where's that report? But because I wasn't doing that, I knew that I had to set priorities and set deadlines, saying like, okay, it's Monday. Here's a project I want you to work on. I'm going to need it by this date. Let me know if there's any problems or if you have any questions. Like I'm here to answer questions, but this is what I need to get to happen. So I think that remote work and remote management gives the person you're managing, the intern or kind of the entry level employee, the space and the freedom to figure everything out and get things wrong or succeed and get it right. But it also keeps the manager in check, and you have to learn how to set deadlines for yourself and your employees, and you have to learn how to prioritize things, because if you don't, it's going to be a mess and things are not going to get done and no one's going to be happy and no one's going to have any work to show for it.
I think that's so true how you mentioned that it's not only beneficial for the person being managed, but it also has an impact on the manager.
Yep.
Because I think it's part of human nature to try and control everything, maybe to try and nag. And I think if you're in that office environment where you see the person you're managing every single day, it's hard for you to maybe like to just walk past them and not to check in on how they're doing.
Yep.
Maybe remote management forces you to really have a hands-off approach and to approach things differently, because you can't send you don't want to be the guy or girl sending an email every hour asking on progress.
No, you don't. And you don't want
to
you don't want to be the kind of person that's a micromanager. Like no one likes to micromanage, I don't think. And no one likes to be micromanaged. So if you can avoid doing those things and being micromanaged, then I think you'll be successful in the end, because I think everyone does their best work when they have the freedom to, kind of be creative. And that's not just in creative fields. It's just the creativity and the freedom to work how you work best, because we all work extremely differently.
And I totally agree with your points. So that's about .me. Let's move into remote year and how you heard about it, how you decided to apply, and everything you're experiencing right now.
Totally. That's kind of a fun story. I heard about remote year through a friend who sent me a Mashable article that remote year was quoted in or featured in almost 2 years ago, kind of October 2014. So I'd started working at About.me just that month. I recently got back from my European travels and whatnot. And the article was just, a preview of remote year, and it was launching in the next summer or something like that. But I signed up for their email list and kind of was like, this sounds like a dream. And I was like, Mom, look at this. Like, this is my absolute dream in the entire world. Put it in the back of my brain for a couple months. And then in June or July of 2015, so last summer, I got an email that was like, remote year 1 just started. They're in Prague, Czech Republic. If you want to be on the next remote year, applications are open. And I was like, oh my God, can't believe this. I was living in New York. Like I had kind of started my digital nomadism remote work adventure. And then this opened up. And so I applied, sent in my initial application. They said, congrats. You're moved on to the second round. Second round comes in. I fill out all the questions, like your experience with remote work, your travel experience. It's just like, it's like a mini interview kind of thing. Combed over my answers. Like it felt like a college application. I was taking it so seriously. I had like 3 people read it, but I didn't tell any of my friends because I didn't want to jinx it. And, I had my mom edit it and I sent it in, and you had to pay a $50 application fee at the time. And I was like, Dad, I was living in New York. I was broke. My apartment was the size of a shoebox. I was like, Dad, should I do it? Like $50? Like this is your dream. Why wouldn't you? And I was like, okay. So I sent it in. next week or 2 weeks later, I get a email that's like, an interview process. I was like, oh, wow, I'm so excited. Sign up for my interview. And kind of some time goes by, and I remember going to a dinner it was a dinner with 10 other strangers. I had signed up. My friend Liang puts these on, but she wasn't my friend at the time. And I went to the dinner, and it was all storytellers. So I was lumped in this group of storytellers. And we're eating this delicious Greek meal and kind of doing these like fun activities. And one of the questions was like, what are you starving for? Of course, I was like, I want to eat like some tzatziki and hummus. Like, give it to me. Yeah. But besides the Greek food, I remember writing down, I was starving for consistency mixed with adventure, or consistent adventure, because I just had sort of felt really stuck in New York, even though New York is a crazy city and you can do everything and anything at any time. I just wanted something more. I didn't want to sit in my tiny apartment and not talk to myself, or talk to only myself all day. And I sort of had this revelation, and I went home and just was like, oh, I have my interview next week, or the next week, or whenever it was. And then the next week I had my interview, and it went great, and it was super easy, and just kind of like felt like I was vibing with the admissions officer. Her name was Emily. We just had a great chat about travel and life and everything. And she was like, okay, like, you'll hear from us soon. And so the next week I was waiting, and I still didn't know if I was going to do it. So I was still like living my life as if I wasn't going to do it. And a couple friends and I were seeing apartments in New York. And
they didn't know about any of this.
No one knew about it except for my parents and maybe one of my coworkers. But no one knew about the fact that I was kind of in the process, like 75% there. And so I'm, looking at apartments. We're house hunting in Brooklyn, like such a millennial's dream, except I'm broke as heck, like can't afford anything. And we decided to put some money on an apartment in Brooklyn, and we put down our deposit. So pumped, so excited. And then one of my roommates just kind of just takes a step back and is like, is this what I want to do? Like, is this where I want to live? Like, I work all the way by Grand Central Station. Like, this is a crazy commute. Everything's running through our head. So we pull the deposit, like, get our money back. Like,
oh, thank God.
Oh, my gosh.
She is the MVP right now.
Yeah, I know, right? So we pull our money, go on with our life. And we're kind of all having this, like, crisis of, like, we're 23 or, how old? Yeah, I guess I was 23. I don't even know. We're 23. Like, what do we do? Like, where do we want to be? Who do we want to be? Like, having the typical 20-something questions that go on in your life.
I think they call it the quarter life crisis.
Yes. There has been quite a few books and Medium articles, I'm sure, written about the quarter life crisis. But we're going through that. And so then I just kind of took a step back, and I was like, do I want to move to New York? Can I afford to move to New York? Like, maybe I'm just going to be a nomad. So I accepted that I was going to be a digital nomad. I was going to move to like Hawaii. I was going to spend some time in Denver, whatever. And then the next week I got a call that was like, you're in remote year. You're leaving at the time I was going to be on a different group that left in February. They're like, you're leaving in February. I was like, oh my gosh. And went back to my family. I was like, I cried. When I got that email, I cried. I was just like, this is a literal dream coming true. Called my parents. Of course, they didn't answer on the first try. And then
I think that always happens.
Right? When you have something important to tell them, they don't answer. But finally got a hold of them. It's never like in the movies. No, they never pick up. But I finally got a hold of them, told them, and I was having second thoughts, and my dad was seeing my second guessing, and he was like, "What? Why wouldn't you? Like, you can do this. You've always wanted to do this. You're never gonna regret this." And everyone I talked to, they always said, "Oh, I wish I'd traveled more in my younger years before I got settled." And I think people don't have the pressure to get quite as settled as much anymore. But I just put in my, down payment or whatever it was at the time, and left New York, went home, went to Aruba, went to Denver, like just was bopping all over. I started my nomad life back in, October, I guess you could say. So almost a year ago, I've been sort of just floating, and, it's been really, really, really great for me. And kind of, I just know that it's not going to be something I ever regret.
No, I'm so glad to hear that, because it sounds like you went through a lot of back and forth, second guessing.
Totally.
And then the stars kind of aligned with your she could have been your roommate, but then she pulled out of the deal, and so many things just came into place for this to all happen.
Yeah, it was like right place at the right time. 100%.
Hey, but I guess that's life. It's destiny, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've been doing some digital nomad. You've been living as a digital nomad actually before you even started remote year. How do you think that has helped you to transition into remote year, and how are your experiences right now? What's it like, spending a month in a different place with initially a bunch of strangers, and now I'm assuming everyone's best friends.
Best friends might be not the best word, but no, we're a family. I think that's a better word to describe it. We have our own quarrels and whatnot, and not everyone's happy all the time, but it's a really amazing group of people that's super inspiring and super different than I am. And I think it's just kind of a beautiful experience to be able to have all these different friends from all different places of all different ages. As someone who recently graduated from college, I think it's easy to kind of get pushed into the just young scene of post-grad, like kind of hanging out with the people you went to college with, or friends from high school if you move back home, and just like you get clumped in this little group and everyone's the same age range. Right now, my friends are 23 to 37. We have people, actually like 46, because we have people in our program who are 46. So it's just a total range of ages. And I think that brings so many more rich relationships into your life that I never really knew how to go after or existed or something I wanted. Like I never was like, I really want a 37-year-old friend. Like I'm going to go out and find one. Like you just don't really think like that. But that has been one of the really amazing part of this experience. So the community has been truly amazing from the beginning. I love my little Custo. That's the name of our group family. But I think that my experience before remote year, working remotely, it taught me how to go with the flow. Set your expectations low or don't have expectations at all, and just kind of ride the wave and see where it takes you. And don't put too much weight into plans or decisions or, where you stand, because that's just going to bite you in the ass afterwards. I think some people came from a very structured life before they came on remote year. And so that's been hard to adjust because you're moving every single month. You have a different home. You have a different language. You have a different roommate.
Right.
You have different food. You have a different currency. Like there's all these variables. And that can totally mess you up if you're someone that like needs to stick by a plan and have control over the situation. But if you can kind of relinquish some of that control, you'll be much more successful on remote year. Granted, we have the total luxury of having someone plan, events for us. So we have, parties every couple of weeks. We have networking events. Right. We have happy hours. We have breakfast. Like someone's planning my travel to and from every city that I go to. I don't have to worry about the hard stuff, so I can worry about like my brain adjusting to a new city. So it kind of takes that weight out of it. But I think that was my experience, kind of moving around and spending time in different cities prepared me, because that's what I'm doing now. And I don't hold myself or the city or the people or the workspace to a high expectation, because I'm used to working out of my mom's dining room table or my bed, to be honest. So it's like I don't look to a city and say, oh, this wasn't like, the last place. Oh, this wasn't like my apartment at home, because to me this is like 10 times better than anything I could be doing if I was back in the States. At least at this point in my life.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that, because you mentioned one of your first stops as a digital nomad was New York. Yeah. And you were, everyone knows New York is very expensive, and you were living out of a shoebox, in your own words. So now that you're on remote year, I know remote year is around, I think now it's a $5,000 down payment and then $2,000 every month. Would you say that you're spending less than you did when you were in New York, and you're getting all of these new experiences? Yeah. How is it like for someone coming out of the US, like cost-wise?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely spending less than when I was living in New York, but I'm also doing side trips, and I'm going out to dinners when I want to go out to dinner. I don't really put myself in a budget box, which will probably bite me in the ass at some point, but I did live at home intermittently for 8 months before I came on remote year. So I saved a good chunk of change before I came on remote year. And I was saving just because I wanted to move out of my parents' house, and I didn't have money. Like I had to, if I was going to move somewhere, I had to put a deposit on an apartment, or or do something. So I was saving for that. And once I found out about remote year, I was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to save for my remote year payments so that every month, instead of paying a full $2,000 from my paycheck, I'm paying like $1,000 from my paycheck and $1,000 from my like remote year savings kind of thing. So I set up the system that makes more sense for me. But as a 23 or 24-year-old, I'm 24 now, it's not the easiest thing in the world to swallow that I'm going to be spending, let's say $27,000 this year. Mm-hmm. Like that's a lot of money. I have student loans. Like it's a lot of money. So I think I'm taking some sacrifices, and when I get home, I'm not going to be spending like this. I'm going to be, altering. So I'm taking a year out of my life to kind of put it into this whole experience instead of, putting that money towards a car or putting that money towards an apartment or, whatever I wanted to do, or actually, paying off my student loans in bigger chunks. So it just depends on you and where you want to put your priorities, I think.
Yeah, because it's definitely an investment on the experience. Sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. 12 countries, 12 months.
Yeah.
And it's just about it's exactly what you said, what people's priorities are. Because totally. I know some people who won't even go out to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they'd rather spend less money on groceries. So everyone's different, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you tell us a bit about your experiences on remote year? What are some of the things that you've enjoyed about traveling from country to country? What are some of the things that maybe people don't really think about until they're in your situation and being forced to adapt to new places?
I think one of the things that has been hard for me is the concept of routines. I don't really like routines. I don't really have them. I'm terrible at working out. I only do a routine if I like it. I used to be terrible about like washing my face at night or taking off my makeup or whatever. But then I found this face wash and makeup remover that I'm obsessed with, and like it's almost relaxing for me. So that's the one routine that I have in my life because I actually like it, and it feels like I'm like, ooh, I get to put my Lush, face wash on. Like I just it's exciting for me, and I don't think I have any other routine in my entire life that I'm that excited about. So when I found that one, I was like, this is a miracle. But I'm not the kind of person that wakes up at 8 every morning and cooks myself breakfast and, goes for a run and then opens my computer and reads my emails. Like it doesn't work for me because some days I want to go to a museum. Some days I want to sleep till 11. Some days I want to go to a coffee shop and read for, 3 hours. So I think the hard part was like accepting how I work best and implementing it as much as I can, but not letting it run my life. So I do know that I work really well in the mornings. And unfortunately, as like I'm working from Europe with a company based in California, I'm 9 hours ahead and I have calls at 7 o'clock at night. And sometimes I'll be on calls till midnight. Like it's just, what I have to get used to. And unfortunately, my brain is not sharp at midnight. I know that if I can get up and do some stuff in the morning, I'll be super focused. I can do my writing in the morning or whatever needs like more brain power. So I know that about myself, but I also don't let it run my life. So I think taking what you know about yourself and applying it as much as you can, but not letting it overwhelm you was a hard thing for me to realize and implement. So sometimes I do have to like hold myself back and it's like, no, Zoe, like you can't go to that museum because you have a lot of work today and you need to do work in the morning. Like, but then the next day I'll be like, you know what? Like, even though I know I do my best work in the morning, I'm going to go to that yoga class, like with my friends, when else am I going to get to do yoga in a park in Serbia in the morning? Like you kind of, you take bits and pieces of what's good for you and, maybe what's bad for you. And then you implement that. So that was kind of a hard realization for me. I think also packing is like the vein of my existence. I'm a girl and I'm a girl who likes to wear nice clothes, like not, expensive clothes, but just I like to dress well. And so packing as a digital nomad is a pain because you also packing and unpacking again and you hate carrying a big suitcase. So there's all these like variables that you have to play with. I wish there was like a clothing line out there that just fit me perfectly and was like travel friendly and didn't wrinkle, but that has yet to exist.
So do you find trouble with controlling yourself whenever you go to a new place, there must be like a lot of things to buy?
Oh my gosh, I am the worst. And like, especially in South America, there was these beautiful patterns and colors and just amazing textiles. And they were very inexpensive. And I set my my mom and stepdad and younger brother came to visit me in London, and I sent them home with a bag of about 4 alpaca blankets and scarves. I don't need these in summer in Europe, so you can take them. So that's kind of the hard part.
That must have been a relief. Like, the reinforcements have arrived and take all the extra stuff you don't
I've
need.
also bought maybe like 5 pairs of shoes in the past 6 months. I have a little bit of a problem in that aspect. But yeah, thankfully people visit you and they can take things home, and you know, you kind of got to plan around that. Like, yeah, I'm having a visitor, aka a mule.
So those are some of the challenges you faced, and I thought it was interesting because from me, it sounded like what you were saying was that you don't really like routines. You're working and living remotely. You need to establish some kind of structure to fall back on. Is my interpretation right?
I think that's a good way to put it. I think you need to know yourself. I think I've talked to other people about becoming a digital nomad or working remotely, and they're like, what would you suggest doing, or what's your biggest piece of advice if you want to work remotely? And I think knowing yourself is the biggest. So whether that's knowing how you work, whether that's knowing if you say yes to everything, and like you just need to know that about yourself, because you're going to be asked, especially on remote year, to go to dinner or to go get drinks or to go on a trip. Like, you're going to be asked to do all these things, and you have to know if you're going to say yes or if you're going to always say no, and where you can find that middle ground. So yeah, I think it's finding, you know, yourself and your pros and cons and how you work and how you live, and trying to implement that without taking it too seriously, because again, like I said before, you have to go with the flow if you're going to be successful in this kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about that, because on one hand you have to go with the flow, but on the other hand, you are the only person who's responsible for managing yourself. The onus is on you completely. Certainly, like, there's a lot of things to juggle, because on one hand you're trying to get used to a new country, new language, new currency, perhaps like a new routine or a different time zone. But on the other hand, you can't shirk the responsibilities and the commitments that you've already made, in your case, to your job. So that's more of like the lifestyle aspect. But what about the social aspect? What's it like being with the same group for a long period of time? Is it possible for you to make friends outside of that group, or are you very much more stick to the people you know who is part of the remote year community?
Remote year can definitely be a bubble. We're a group of 70 people who all speak English traveling. It's easy to get comfortable in that bubble. But I also think that it's so unique to have this kind of, we're like a traveling fraternity that like works together. Like, we're a bunch of really fun, smart, you know, cool people that just like, you know, we're just traveling together. It's like we are living, you know, the dream. But it does come with the drawbacks, and some of those are that bubble. So I try to spend like a lot of time with the people, because I know also that this is going to end. Like, I don't want to take these relationships for granted, and I want them to continue afterwards. And I know that it's almost like the network that you might build from doing a graduate program or an MBA or something. That's what I'm getting right now. It's almost like a school experience for me, and that network that comes out of that. But in terms of kind of meeting locals and all that stuff, it's really up to you. And if you don't want to spend time in the bubble, you know, you don't have to. Granted, you're going to see us walking around, and we're in smaller cities, so you're going to run into people on public transportation, and you're going to go on a Tinder date and someone's going to be across the bar. Like, it's just going to happen. We're 70 people. Like, we're pretty invasive. So I think you just have to kind of know what you like. Again, you have to know what you like and what you seek out. I know personally that my first month in Cordoba, I met some really amazing people some locals, who really kind of changed my experience with that city. And I know if I ever go back to Argentina, I'll have people to kind of like run to and, you know, have a beer with or whatever. I hadn't really had that same connection in the past 6 months, unfortunately. In London, I met a lot of amazing people, but it was very work focused. I was doing a lot of informational meetings and just kind of meeting people in the product world. And finally, actually in Belgrade, in less than a week, like, I feel like I've already met some people that I will know for hopefully the rest of my life. So it's really all about you putting yourself out there, and you getting out of that bubble and like not telling people where you're gonna go get coffee. And you know, it's really hard to be alone in remote year, which is fun because I'm an ambivert, so I'm kind of introvert and extrovert. So it can get really overwhelming, and sometimes I feel kind of suffocated. But at the same time, it's so awesome when we're at a bar or club and like we just take over the dance floor. Like, those are things that I like. Some people are not a fan of that. So you kind of have to know if that's how it's going to fit you. And granted, every remote year cohort is going to be different. We just happen to be kind of like a really like kind of close knit group who like to, work together, and, maybe some groups are more business focused, but we're kind of this middle ground, I'd like to think.
The way you talk about it makes me really want to be part of remote year as well.
That's good to hear. I mean, it's pretty unreal. It's pretty great.
So you have 5 more months to go for remote year. What are you thinking about doing afterwards? Are you planning on going back to the United States for a bit? Or I've actually been following a few people from the first remote cohort, and I think one of them decided to stay in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, I think. I want to hear your thoughts. What are your plans post remote year? Because you're definitely starting to think about that, right?
Yeah, it's definitely, after we hit the halfway point, it's become a lot more front of mind for me. I think because I work for a California-based company that actually has an office, and most of the product team is in the San Francisco area. I'll make my way back to California for a bit and get some face time in and see what the next steps are for me at the company, and just where I'm at with them. My team is great, and I'm actually going back to San Francisco next week to see them, and so I'll definitely make my way back. But as of right now, I'd love to like get a little bit more of Asia in while I end there. We end in Vietnam, so I'd love to do Indonesia, maybe the Philippines, I don't know, maybe hit up Australia while I'm kind of in that area. It's expensive and it takes a long time to get over there again. So I think while I'm there, I'd love to make the most of it, and then circle back to the Bay Area, spend a little time there, and then from there just see kind of where the wind takes me. I really have no plans. I'm really just kind of focusing on now and what's happening now, and I don't need to have a plan. It's kind of just like when I still have a job, so I'll have hopefully, money, but, it just kind of depends on where my financial situation also is there. So it's really open-ended for me right now. And I'm super fortunate to have such an awesome job and team that's flexible with what I'm doing right now. So really grateful for that. And we'll see what happens. You'll have to check in like 6 months.
No, definitely. And it's really cool because while you're doing all this traveling, experiencing all these different cultures, at the same time, it's not like you're putting your career aside. You're still growing and you're still learning something professionally 100%. Every day. And I think that's the coolest thing, to find that combination, because usually people talk about travel and work as completely separate things. And I think it's so cool that now in the 21st century, it's almost like the lifestyle you're living is a choice. Like if people really do their research, think about what they want, I'm pretty convinced that they can take some actionable steps to living this lifestyle 100%. Without having to sacrifice one thing or the other.
I agree.
So we're almost hitting the hour mark. So I guess one of the last things I wanted to ask you is, for the people out there who are thinking about living this lifestyle, what would you recommend? I know you kind of stumbled into this organically, very naturally, but based on meeting other people from the remote year program, do you see some trends? Like, is there something that people can be doing right now to make this type of lifestyle a reality for them?
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of them is get your work situated to be able to be remote before you even try to be remote. I think if you are like, oh, I'm going to be remote tomorrow, and you move to a cabin in the middle of the woods and you set up your Wi-Fi and you clock in at, a Monday morning and start to work remotely, you're not going to know what to do. I think you should take gradual steps into remote work to see if it's right for you and to learn how you work best. Are you a morning person? Can you work at coffee shops? Will your job even allow you to work at coffee shops, or are they too loud because you have to be on calls all the time? Like, is the Wi-Fi at coffee shops not enough of a bandwidth for you to send files to clients? Like, you can't just dive into it before like figuring out the nitty-gritty. I think that a lot of people in remote year were fortunate enough to get into the program and then convince their employers to say yes to them going on remote year. Not everyone is quite as lucky. I was in a different situation because I had already been working remotely, and it wasn't so much of a sell on remote work. It was just a sell on Zoe's going to be international instead of national. And then it was also just kind of, figuring out the details of how it would work with my team if there were to be any with the time zones and whatnot. But if you are thinking about going on a remote year, or if you're thinking about diving into remote work and doing it yourself, then just try it. Like maybe for a week instead of taking kind of vacation time, see if you can take a week of remote time and go to, a city you've never been to in the country that you live in, and work remotely and kind of gauge that with your employer and see how it works for you. Or maybe just once a week, like work at home, work at a coffee shops, or just little things like that. If you are homesick and instead of taking an actual sick day, just see if working remotely works for you. It doesn't work for all professions. Some people need face-to-face time. Some people, maybe not for their profession, but for their own personal growth and for their own success, like in their company and in their position, they need to see their boss every day. So you just have to know how you work and how you can be successful. But then also like what you're willing to sacrifice. So maybe it's not ideal in that position that you're in right now, but maybe there's another position at your company that would be a little bit more flexible in terms of you working remotely. So I think just test, like it's A/B testing your life, figure out what works and do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So one option is for people to kind of experiment with whether or not working remotely is possible in their current positions. Another option is to see if there are other positions in their current company that can provide them with those opportunities. So, and I'm assuming the third option is if they get to a point where they really feel like they enjoy remote work more, to find a company that aligns with that kind of mindset.
Totally. And there's a lot more popping up. Like Buffer is one that I know has totally been adopting remote work and just kind of really making their mark in that sense. The other option is to go freelance. Like that's super possible nowadays. You can find clients, but then again, don't just dive in, like kind of take on little bits at a time and see what works for you. I think I've had my own like thoughts about going freelance, and I've kind of found that it just wasn't going to be right for me because it involves a lot of that like pitching and stuff. And especially when you're on the road all the time, I want to enjoy the city. I don't want to spend my entire morning like just trying to find a client. Like I'd just rather have a salary and like do my work and work as much as I need to. And that's just like what I prefer, especially when I'm moving around so much. But maybe if you're working remotely in one city in the States, like you can be a little bit more flexible with your clients and the companies that you work with.
Awesome. So I think we covered a lot of stuff and a lot of really great content. So to wrap up, how can people learn more about you? How can they follow your experiences and your journey?
Well, they can go to my about.me page. That'll be my product placement of the podcast. My about.me is about.me/KZOEB. And I link out to my Instagram, which I post on almost daily, of all my adventures around the world. I tweet a lot. It'll be everything from thoughts on marketing and advertising to just like, oh my God, it's September, which is something that I tweeted today because I was like blown away that it was already September. And then I also blog pretty regularly on my Medium account, which is also on my about.me page.
Okay, so as long as people hit your about.me
it's got everything.
Because it's your digital business card.
It
like we
is.
discussed.
It is. It's got everything you need to know about me from a first introduction.
Cool. Well, with that, I just wanted to thank you so much for being one of our first podcast guests.
Thank you, Richard.
It's super exciting to hear about how you discovered remote work and how you're grabbing life by the horns and now you're traveling all the time.
Yep.
So I'm super excited to keep tabs on your journey. But thanks again for stepping on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to my interview with Zoe. If you want to find out more about Zoe and her adventures, along with more information on everything we talked about, visit www.theremotelifestyle.com/2, where you can find the show notes and the transcription for this week's episode. Once again, that's www.theremotelifestyle.com/2. That's all for now. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe. I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.